Good evening, everybody. Before I begin, I want to thank everyone for another great semester. This one's been especially busy for me between work travel and extra lab work, even getting married, which has been fantastic, but it's been hectic. Professor, I want to thank you so much for being understanding about my schedule. It really means a lot. I never thought I'd say this, but I hope to see you all in summer school. Okay, so here we go. By the numbers here, got a script. Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan. I am a graduate student of Boston University's Metropolitan College. As a requirement for the Business Data Communication and Networks course during the spring 2018, I have done a project on HomePlug. Okay, I'm not very good with scripts. So I did a project on HomePlug, or by that I mean IEEE 1901. Or maybe you've heard of it as the Powerline AV systems. I don't know. It's not very popular here in the United States. But for this report, I'm just going to call it HomePlug. Now, the concept of HomePlug is pretty simple. You have internet over power. Or at least network over power. At its most basic, HomePlug is just two paired boxes that are connected into the outlet and then through the power lines in your home. They communicate with one another to transfer your network through the existing power lines. Now, they can't function as a router. You'll still need a router in your home network, but they do carry the signal, almost as if you had a Cat5 cable running between them. You'll still need that central router, but you can get a surprisingly strong signal anywhere you have a power outlet. Now, during my lab tests, I had, spoiler alert, a 50% more throughput increase than my existing wireless end solution. So how is HomePlug able to do this? Transmit data over lines that are already being used for power. Well, there's a massive science involved in all of this, and most of it is so far above my head I can barely see it. However, it relies on a pretty simple concept. The power in your home operates between 50 and 60 hertz. HomePlug, in the first iteration, is designed to work from 2 to 28 megahertz. HomePlug 2 actually goes up to 80 megahertz. Now, while your home electrical system was never designed for such high frequencies, it's perfectly capable of transmitting them, at least in most cases. But what about all the noise and disturbance that are created by electrical equipment in the home? Electrical systems and motors can give off all kinds of electrical noise. No one has ever sat down, designed a microwave thinking, oh boy, I better use a clean power supply or I'll interrupt people's Netflix. Again, so HomePlug brags about having these 1,000 megabits per second transfer speed, but what does that look like really in an actual home? So in order to test for myself, I created a small lab. I went out and I bought two sets of HomePlug devices, one that were $70 for a pair, and the other, the ComTrend AV200 Powerline Ethernet bridges, which cost me less than a Big Mac meal, and relied on the older HomePlug standards. I then used those boxes to connect two Windows systems. So not sure what to expect, fired up the systems, and I chose a half gig file and transferred them between the systems through the Powerline system. I monitored the file transfer speed, dropped packets, TCP retransmissions, everything I could get a hold of through Wireshark and more. Now what surprised me immediately, as I stated earlier, I actually saw a jump in throughput and transfer capabilities in my existing wireless setup. Not only did I have a 50% increase in throughput, but the transfer speed was really stable throughout the entire transfer, with less than a 1% packet loss. In fact, the more expensive Powerline systems I used for my computer for over 2 months, with everything from gaming to Netflix to web browsing, and it performed flawlessly. Well, HomePlug works really well as a really boring lab, so I couldn't have that. So of course, I set out to break it.
I must break you.
Now, I knew where I'd start. While there's little documentation on how to optimize HomePlug, every source that I could get a hold of, from homeplug.org to the little broken English pamphlet that came with my device, was clear, unanimous. Never plug HomePlug through a surge protector. It's a terrible idea. So naturally, that's the first thing I did, only to be completely let down by the results. Okay, so I got a packet loss increase to about 3%, but honestly, on a practical level, the transfer speed was identical. I was flabbergasted. Could the internet be wrong? So determined, I lined up the cheaper Powerline boxes on the same surge protector. This time, I got what I expected. After watching the expected transfer speed on the Windows box grow from 10 minutes to 2 hours to 16 hours, I knew at least the cheaper boxes, you get what you pay for, I'd finally broken. They'd probably still be transferring if I let them. So okay, with the $5 boxes clearly out of the fight, I set my sights on troubleshooting and kind of breaking the more modern HomePlug set. I went back to homeplug.org to look for something else diabolical to test it against. Something labeled "Do Not Try," and I found something. Keep HomePlug products away from equipment with a motor, like a treadmill, fan, or vacuum cleaner. Well, of course. I kept HomePlug devices connected to the surge protector, and then I added a vacuum cleaner. Haha!
I have you now.
Finally, I had a measurable impact on performance. A whopping 25% reduction in throughput. Seriously? Now, I had been personally asked in class by James, what gives the most distortion? And all I could come up with was reducing the transfer speed from 20 megabytes to 15 megabytes per second. So I was desperate, so I continued to run the test, and that's when I noticed something. If I turned the vacuum cleaner on and off during the test, I noticed a surge in TCP errors and retransmissions. Wireshark began to look something like this. It was just line after line of TCP retransmissions anytime I turned the vacuum cleaner on and off. Now in tests, which I cycled the vacuum cleaner on and off several times, I was able to get the transfer speed down to a whopping 30 to 35%. And you could actually see the spikes in TCP retransmissions on the Wireshark in relation to every time I turned it on and off. As the motor spun up, the power frequency that noise that motor put out seemed to be much higher, which interrupted the HomePlug devices, which was again trying to use those higher frequencies. Now, the later versions of HomePlug do a really good job about doing frequency jumping, recognizing that there's an interruption and changing to a different frequency on the fly. And that's really probably the only reason these HomePlug devices continued to work at all while I was turning this vacuum cleaner on and off. I theorized that if I continuously, rapidly, again and again, turn the vacuum cleaner on and off, I probably could have reduced the transfer speed even more than 30 to 35%. But hey, vacuum cleaners are expensive. And this one was my wife's. Anyway, I conducted one last test. This one was for you, Phil, regarding another bit of HomePlug advice. Keep them away from cell phone chargers. I was skeptical that I'd see any interference from a humble cell phone charger. After all, I just threw a fucking vacuum cleaner at it. But it turns out that cell phone chargers are notorious for leaking out high-frequency noise. Of course, right into those same higher frequencies that HomePlug is trying to use.
Loud noises!
I actually saw a 10 to 15% hit. Now, that's not much, but that's a drastic impact for such a humble device, and certainly something people should keep in mind if they decide to use HomePlug. The question has also been brought up, how secure is HomePlug really? Can it leak outside your house through the power lines? Well, from a security standpoint, the answer is each HomePlug device has different levels of security, but even the lowly $5 box that I bought used 128-bit AES encryption. Now, while 256 AES is slowly replacing 128-bit, 128-bit is still relatively secure. Now, can the signal leak outside your home? Yeah, absolutely. While reading reviews, I found one user who actually had her box in the barn 200 feet away from the house, went through the barn breaker box, outside through the power lines 200 feet, then into her house through another breaker box, and she still got full transfer speed. So if you're in an apartment complex or something like that, you're absolutely going to have signal leaking out. Now, the good news is if you're in a home that goes out to a transformer, the transformer does a really good job scrambling the signal, but something to think about if you're in an apartment. You're going to rely on whatever encryption that device uses. The final conclusion of my lab trials is this. Hey, HomePlug is ready for the front lines. No pun intended. I put it through a torture test, through some of the worst things I could throw at it. And if you purchase devices using the latest standards, and therefore spend more than $5, you're very likely to get incredible performance. Now, if wireless is working already for you, great, that's fantastic. You probably want to stick with it. But if you struggle to get a signal to the far reaches of your house, I highly recommend filling those gaps with a HomePlug.